Right, I've been watching some video about Mexico, and to be frank with you, Mexico City and maybe the surrounding areas, to be honest with you, looks really, really cool. I don't understand what many of these sort of darker DACA, or what we call it, deferred action for childhood arrivals. I think because I've been reading many who have actually made the decision to go back. Um, it is very, very difficult. It is very, very difficult to adjust. And I fully understand. I'm not, but many people in society in the world, when they've traveled to another world or another place, and they have to adjust, it's just one of them unfortunately those things you must do. Mexico looks really cool. I think many of their fears are unfounded, and I'm reading some Mexicans who've gone back, who were born in Mexico, went to America very, very young, and now went back on their own, under their own steam, have realised that, hold on a minute, actually it's not too bad, and they've gotten used to it. They're now free to wander around. They now have some of them even have better opportunities than they did when they were in America, because when they were under this DACA, they were limited of what they can do. So probably in the end, many people in Mexico, if they go back, will probably end up thinking, hold on a minute, it's not as bad as I thought it would be. Mexico is actually a cool place, you know. Because when I've seen films of Mexico in the past, I thought, wow, it looks a bit American-y. It looks really cool. Some parts of it, obviously, there's going to be poor parts, but hey, there's tons of poor parts of America. Um, so I think maybe the DACA people, sorry, should perhaps give it a go rather than country. That doesn't want you. You are there, to be honest with you, under a temporary program, and Mr. Trump wants to end it. So he's going to end it if he can. So, and also when if you do go back to Mexico, and you really want to come back, then I'm sure if you reapply, it's going to be tough, because the American embassy, is, I think, one of the nastiest and horrible places to go to try and get a visa, or you want a permanent stay. But what else can you do? My mother experienced that when she was in Nigeria. People were treated like cattle at one time in the 80s. When I remember, and I used to stand, and I used to, because I wasn't allowed to go in to the embassy back in the 90s. I remember seeing her having to push through the door to try and get in, before they shut the door, and for her to get in. I'm not sure. No, I think she was successful, but it's tough. It was hard. So I fully understand what these people are talking about and what they're going through. But I'm afraid if you've got Mexicans that are actually applying, go to the American embassy, and yes, spend 5-10 years probably trying to get citizenship, but they do make it. You have to do the same. You have to do the same. America is separate from Mexico. I think there are people who are thinking that they want to open the borders and so people flow, across freely, and without any restriction. Um, what would that do to the American economy? I don't know. But the Americans don't want people coming in willy-nilly. It's as simple as that. But I need to study how Canada operates its border with America, and what is the restrictions there? How easy it is to flow between the two borders in comparison to the Mexican border. I think the problem is the Mexico has a problem with gangs, has a problem with drugs, has a problem with crime. They can't get away from that, and this is the problem. These guys want to come in. When they do something, then if they do something in the US, they can run back and get away and all this kind of business. But I think, I think if America wants a border, and if they want to operate a border, they're entitled to operate the border. So you should come into the country legally. You just have to apply. It's as simple as that, to come into the border. And as I said, I think Mexico looks really, really cool, and they should give it a try. I remember someone told me 6 weeks on holiday who's a telecoms engineer, and he told me, he says, "Oh, Mexico," he says, "it's really, really cool," and he says, "Mexico City is fantastic." So, give it a go. There's some really cool looking buildings, exactly like the Americans building, probably even better. The infrastructure could be even better. There is going to be problems, and the unfortunate thing I've been reading, the girls, apparently her Spanish is not very. What she thinks is good Spanish is not, and then they get jealous of the fact that her English is, perfect, and theirs is not. So, you can't win. But unfortunately, it's everybody goes through that. I remember a guy who went to Jamaica for it. People would say to him, "What are you doing here in Jamaica? Why aren't you in London? What are you do? Why are you wanting to live here?" Because many Jamaicans want to jump out of Jamaica to go and live in Britain or in America or abroad. So, he said eventually that got on his nerve so much that he, ended up leaving. Back to the US. That's actually US. So, obviously, it's not all bad. And this lady here, I can't pronounce the name. I think the person is now 27. Was one of several people who spoke to the Guardian in Mexico about what they lost by leaving the US before DACA, what they gained, and what might now face those who will lose protection. They spoke of tough challenges, including the need to navigate new healthcare and education systems, which is true. If you've never been there for a long time, you've got a new education system and you're fairly young, it can be a problem. They spoke of local hostility. Typically, their Spanish is mocked, while some resent their fluent English. They also discussed cultural and emotional challenges, including separation from friends and families. I totally understand, you know. And the thing is, I went through that when me and my brother came. When my father went back abroad, and then, but my brother, and my mother were still here in London. But after I think 2 or 3 years, 2 more years, Mum had no real choice because her mother was, I think 65 at the time, and she was worried that she wouldn't live to see her daughter again, even though she lived to 90. So Mum was pulled back and went back and took, but she did say, I remember her saying to me, I was about 9, 10. She asked me the question. She said, "Do you want to stay here, or should we go back?" And as a 9-year-old kid, I had this, I was born abroad. I wasn't here. So I was 9, and I thought, it's going to be paradise. I said, "No, let's go home. We're going to go back." So, and to be honest with you, ended up saving her life. I think because she was living a life of cigarettes, drinking a lot, going out and partying, because she was a young girl. And she had to give up all that when she went back abroad. I lived abroad for a year, and I can tell you, I understand clearly, for 1 year, I thought I wanted to come back to the UK. I wanted to come back to the UK. And it even after a year, it still took me a time to adjust. But then, I think back then there was a policy. Sorry, before the 1 year was up, you had to come back to UK. Otherwise, you wouldn't be allowed to come back again, or for a very, very long time. So Mum bundled me and my brother back before the year was up, which I hadn't known about it. I thought I was going to go to school there. Ended up coming back to the UK, and I think, was it a good decision? I don't know. Yes, no, yes, no. I suppose I would have liked the family to have been together. We spent literally, when we came back in 74, it wasn't until actually, it wasn't until I was 10. Yeah, it wasn't until I was 15, 5 years later, that I saw Mum again. When we went back when I was 15, we stayed for whatever period of time, 6 weeks. And I tell you, 6 weeks flies by in that situation. It really, really goes by very, very, very quickly. I mean, 6 weeks feels like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, because it really, really goes. But you're not wanting the time to go. Then we came back, and then I don't know how many years was it before I saw. Anyway, so I understand what they're going through, but the issue is this: the Americans have put up a border. They want that border to be respected, and they want people to apply from Mexico via normal channels. I'm assuming across Canada and the US. Um, but then, even if there isn't, it doesn't matter, regardless. They can do their border how they want. If the border is fairly open in Canada and the US, I mean, obviously, because lots of Canadians live in Canada, they probably come over to the US and then they go back out. They don't want to come back again, or they just visit every so often when they need to. They're not planning to stay or live. And, you know, so Canada is a first world country. It's been classed as a great, best country to live in the world in the past. So America has no real struggle with keeping, um, when people go back, they go back. They come across the border for a weekend and they go back because they've got somewhere, they want to go back. But the problem is that if you've got millions of people, thousands, millions of people who are undocumented that come in, there's only a finite amount of money. And hey, if they're you never know. They may be able to then come across back into the US or go to Canada and migrate to Canada. So I think it's for people first not to be instead of living under this sort of feeling of terror. Let's go back. If they've got family there that can help them and guide them through, let's go back and make new friends and all this kind of business and see how it goes. It may turn out to be better than the US in the long run. You never know. Anyway, that's my take. Thanks very much.